Hi folks, Tim at Kennedy's Plumbing and Heating in Hartford, Connecticut. I wanted to talk to you about no heat calls. Sometimes folks call us up, and if you have oil, I'll tell you the couple of things that you might want to just check before you call for emergency service. With oil, probably the first most important thing is make sure that all the switches are on, okay? Sometimes there's a light switch at the top of the stairs before you enter the basement, and it gets shut off by accident, and it's a red switch and it says oil burner. If it got shut off, turn it back on, should be all set. The next thing is to make sure that you have oil, okay? Sometimes people say, well, I'm pretty sure I do, and you got to go down and take a look at the gauge, and then if you got more than a quarter of a tank or an eighth of a tank, I guess you should be able to fire it. The next question is there power to the unit? Are there any signs of life? If you go down to the unit on a gas boiler, or a oil boiler rather, or an oil-fired hot air furnace, if there's a manual switch, an on-off switch, look for lights, red light, green light, anything. If you don't see any lights, you can take the switch, shut it off, and see if you hear a difference in sound, any humming that stops or starts. If you turn it on and there's a humming sound, any vibrating noise you hear, chances are that's the sound of electricity working on a transformer or something. Now, if there is some kinds of life, you hear humming, you can always look down in the front of the unit. There's a oil burner. Sometimes you have to remove a cover, and usually on the front of the oil burner there's a red button. It says press and hold down for a few seconds, and you're only allowed to do that one time. If you press that red button, it resets the burner and it'll try to fire. And let's say it runs, gets up, starts going, the smoke pipe gets hot, it starts heating your house, and it never stops. Well, you're back in business. Occasionally it happens. Sometimes though, it'll run for about 10 or 15 seconds, and because it does not establish a flame, it shuts off. Now, let's say that you have no electricity. You should go to your circuit breakers and make sure that the breaker for oil furnace or boiler is not tripped or the fuse is blown. If the fuse is blown, replace it. If there's a breaker and it's tripped, shut it off, wait a few seconds, turn it on. And if you're not sure if there's any power, it doesn't hurt to shut the power off, interrupt it for 5 seconds, turn the power back on, then go back. If it's not running, hit the red reset button, see if it'll start. Now on some of the brand new oil-fired equipment, they have a new control, and the trick is you have to hold that red button down for 45 seconds. Now, if you hold the red button down for 45 seconds, you let it go and it starts up and it's running, you're back in business. If it starts and it runs for 10 or 15 seconds and stops, there's a time delay. It'll wait 2 minutes before it tries again. Then after 3 tries that are unsuccessful, it goes into lockout and it shuts off. The only way to reset it is hold the button down again for another 45 seconds. But bear in mind, every time you do this, you could be letting more and more oil build up inside the combustion chamber because it could be a lack of spark. It only takes 3 things to create heat. You have to have oxygen, you have to have a spark, and you have to have an atomized spray of oil. If you have those 3 things, chances are you're going to have heat and everything's going to be working fine. Oil burners, boilers, furnaces, and burners should all be cleaned once a year, at the very most every 2 years. So if it's been a long, long time, it's probably something that needs to be done. The next question is, how do you determine whether or not you have spark, or you have fuel oil coming in, or there's a lack of air? Chances are you got air. The 2 things that usually stop it from running is no spark or no oil. Now, in a lot of boilers or furnaces, there's a round inspection plate. You can usually swing the little door open, look inside. You can hit the reset button, stand back, hold it with a screwdriver if you'd like, and see what you see. If you see nothing, no spark, no flame, okay, after it shuts off, take your flashlight, shine the flashlight inside. If you see a lot of atomized spray, okay, almost like mist, then that's telling you you're getting oil, because the oil that comes out is not just a squirt, it's an atomized spray, so it's like a fog that's inside. If you see that, that's telling you that you have oil and your filter's not clogged. But let's say you look inside and you hear buzzing, bzzz, that's the electricity trying to ignite, but there's no oil. Now, how could you have no oil? Either your oil tank is empty, or the valve is shut off, somebody shut it off, and I doubt that's going to happen. Or number 2 or 3, the oil filter itself is clogged. Okay, now, simple to change an oil filter. If you want to get dirty, put on some rubber gloves, put a plastic garbage bag underneath the filter. Shut the bottom valve off underneath the tank. Loosen the main nut on the filter, drop the filter. Pull out the cartridge, it's just an element. Put in another one. Okay, make sure there's a gasket on top, squeeze it back up, tighten up the bolt, then open up the valve again. But on top of the red canister, there's a little tiny screw. Loosen that screw and let the air come out and the oil fill up in that can all the way to the top till oil starts to ooze out of that screw. Then you tighten up that screw. Now you're back in business. Wipe everything off dry and make sure no oil's leaking. If it isn't, if it's leaking, obviously you got to tighten it up a little bit more or redo it, okay? But if nothing's leaking, put a little bit of cat litter, Speedy Dry down on the floor. Dispose of properly your old oil filter and any oil in the gloves. And then go back to your burner. Hit the reset button. Now some people say, well, I've got oil, I fixed it. I put the filter in. Now I have to bleed it because there's air in the line. It's very simple. If you kneel down in front of any oil burner and you put your left hand out, on the side of the oil burner there's a round circle. That round circle is a fuel oil pump, and there's about 6 or 7 or 8 bolts around the circle. If you face that fuel pump at the 5 o'clock position, there is going to be a little nozzle coming out at an angle. It's a bleeder. It's like if you ever bled brakes in a car. Same thing. Loosen that a quarter of a turn. Hit the red reset button and have a cup underneath that bleeder. It spits out air, oil, and then a steady stream of oil comes out. Quickly tighten the nut and it'll convert to going into the burner and it'll start your fire. And then dispose of the oil that came out into the cup properly. Go outside and pour it back into your oil fill at your oil tank. So that takes care of oil-fired troubleshooting for the homeowner. A couple of things you should check before you call for service. But if you need a professional in the greater Hartford area, you can always call Kennedy's Plumbing and Heating at 860-296-4867, or you can look us up on the web at kennedysPlumbing.com. My name's Tim Kennedy. Thank you for listening.